Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp. is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, the publisher of TheBreaker.News. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, I guess to me and a lot of other people, the protests against the LNG project pipeline between Fort St. John and Kitimat has come out of nowhere. But you say there is kind of a background that started back in December.
Well, this December was when the company was going to court to get the injunction to take it all down. But this Stoughton camp has been going on for years and years and years. For a while, it didn't seem like it was really opposed at all because, well, there wasn't really the economics to go ahead with the pipeline and with an LNG plant. But that's kind of turned around in recent years, and the NDP has supported the LNG industry to the surprise of some of their supporters who, when they were in opposition, were opposing it. And the BC Liberals were on the other side of the fence as the government pushing forward the industry. But John Horgan has been waving the flag for LNG, went to China last year, and has said some things in favor of the wood fiber LNG as well. So that's the next one to watch for as we wait for a real final investment decision. There was that photo op back in fall of 2016, around the time the BC Liberal leadership, no, it wasn't the leadership, but it was just one of their regular policy conventions where they said that there was a final investment decision, but there wasn't really a final investment decision. I reported on it late last year that there was a deal worth about $1 billion. Some of it was cash, but a lot of it was potential contracts for Squamish Nation and Squamish Nation companies to support wood fiber LNG. So that's coming closer together. But this protest, there's a bit of a division among the Wet'suwet'en people. There's the elected chiefs, and then there's the hereditary chiefs. Wet'suwet'en, of course, was one of the bands that many years ago was the beneficiary of a monumental Supreme Court decision regarding the rights and title of native land. So this is something that's gone on for a long time, and the usual suspects, the industry versus the environmentalists, are going to and fro on this. And of course, the industry supporters are saying how many bands there are up and down the proposed line that actually support this. And the major question of that is, well, how many of those bands actually supported their own people? How many of them actually have referendums, for instance? How many of them actually have a proper mandate from their people? Because there's been an issue in recent years looking at the Aboriginal and industrial relations when it comes to major resource projects. There's actually a Transparency International Canada study that was put out in December in time for their day of dialogue, which I attended in Vancouver. Their first Western Canada Corruption Barometer. They had two reports in that. One was a general analysis of a poll that they conducted. They had Leger Marketing do a poll for them. The other one was about the extractive industries, about oil, gas, and mining industries. They had the pollster also talk to about 100 people in the Western Canadian, who are executives in the Western Canadian oil, gas, and mining industry to get their perceptions of their industry and how their industry may be affected by corruption. And while most of them downplayed the impacts of corruption, some of them did actually mention that there was some concern about doing deals with First Nations, because a lot of First Nations, mostly in British Columbia, actually don't have treaties. There are no treaties, unlike some parts of the prairies, and therefore the land situation is not so cut and dried. But without treaties, it really is in the hands of the chiefs. Many of them are elected, and those are the ones doing the deals with these companies. And the question is, are the chiefs doing those deals with the consent of their own people? And are all the arrangements above board and transparent, or is there a corruption going on? So big question there that I always have whenever this debate happens about resource development, that and whether First Nations groups actually do give consent. Are they giving consent because they've asked their own people, or are they giving consent because a small group of chiefs are the ones at the table negotiating, and are those chiefs actually doing their best with all the ideals of integrity at the bargaining table to make sure that whatever money does flow into that First Nation, if they do say yes, if that money does flow to the people, the rank and file people on the ground that need it the most for housing, for healthcare, for education.
Now, when it comes to hereditary chiefs, they're saying, well, there's 100 clans along the pipeline. Who do you negotiate with? That's
a good question. And, again, you also got to go back to, the government because, provincial government, federal government, it's been about 3 decades or so since they set up the Treaty Commission. And, I think a lot of questions have to be asked about the treaty negotiations because, that was set up at a time when there was, some deep divisions, and around the time of the Oka crisis, for instance, in Quebec, our government said that they didn't want another Oka, that they realized that because of court decisions and royal proclamations from centuries past, that the people who were here first before the Europeans were the ones who had a claim on the land, and they had to be dealt with properly and with respect and consulted and accommodated, all of those things. That was the idea of the BC government, the federal government. We didn't want another Oka. We didn't want another Gustafson Lake. Get beyond these land disputes, have self-government, and allow the people who have the claim to the land to take over the land, take over the risk as well, and be the ones to negotiate and deal with these situations. And again, without proper treaties throughout the province in every single area, you do have these questions that then probably will be kicked down to the courts about who really runs the show. Is it the hereditary chiefs? Is it the elected chiefs? And why can't this be better defined for all? Because this isn't fair for anyone. There could be chances for jobs and economic development within those First Nations. But at the same time, are some of the First Nations cutting corners, from the environmental standpoint, turning a blind eye to things? Are some of them involved in any corrupt activities? We just don't know. But without a better governance system and without better definitions, you have this problem and this continuing conflict between industry and the environment.
Will this $40 billion project be tied up in the courts like the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
Good question, but the easy answer is no, because you've got a government that supports it. And it puts John Horgan in a tight place because reconciliation with Indigenous people has been a major part of his government, thrown a lot of money at various First Nations to increase their lot in life and to increase opportunities and help those that have wanted help. But again, you've got this, the hereditary chiefs there who say that they haven't been listened to. And then the other question is, well, could this pipeline have been, or the infrastructure that's needed for this project for Coastal GasLink, could it have been routed differently so as to avoid this dispute? All these questions. But as much as they might try to dispute it, the power's in the hands of the courts and the police right now. The police are working this week to dismantle the protest infrastructure so that the infrastructure for this project can go ahead. So the short answer is no. This won't meet the same fate as Trans Mountain because the BC government supports this. John Horgan and the NDP are supporting this project, and I think it's going to go ahead. It's of course in the hands really of the investors to really push it forward, as well as get all the required permits that they want to get from the government.
Some have suggested that perhaps this is being funded by U.S. groups that are secretly backed by the U.S. natural gas industry that doesn't want the competition?
Well, some of the similar discourse has been happening around the oil industry as well, and the opposition to oil pipelines. But on the other side of the coin, you do also have some very large foreign companies that are involved in this too, investing in oil and gas infrastructure and mining infrastructure in BC as well, especially state-owned enterprises from China. So, I mean, the foreign funding debate is one that is live, that should be discussed. Ultimately, this is British Columbia, this is Canada, and we rely on our governments to make the best decisions possible using the best science possible and not be swayed by lobbyists and corporate funders wherever they may be. So, a lot of us here are sort of sitting in the middle and hoping that our resources fetch a good price on the world market, that royalties do come back to the province, and that our environment is handled in a proper way. I mean, it's not much to ask.
Are the LNG protests being organized to perhaps take attention away from the Alberta truck convoy to Ottawa, which is pro-pipeline?
I'm sure that the anti-pipeline forces enjoy getting the attention that they're getting. But I think the ones in Alberta that are happening, those may be a little more spontaneous, although you never know. There's probably elements of the federal Conservatives as well as Jason Kenney and his United Conservatives in Alberta that are doing their best to encourage these protests. The Yellow Vest and Trucker protests in Alberta. It is an election year in Alberta, and is an election year federally, and Alberta thinks it's not being done very well by Trudeau and by Rachel Notley. So that is a debate there, but there is, of course, this ongoing dispute between interests here in BC, interests in Alberta, and different visions on how our resources and our environment should be handled.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Aben Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Aben's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at abenresources.com.
Grand Portage Resources recently completed the 2018 drill program on its 100% controlled Herbert Gold Discovery property located in the prolific Juneau Belt in southeast Alaska. Drill results are expected through late 2018. Past drill results included numerous multi-ounce gold assays on multiple veins. Grand Portage trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, we have two by-elections in BC that are of high interest. One's provincial, the other one is federal. Let's go provincial first in Nanaimo. How close of a race is that going to be, and what's at stake for the BC government right now?
Well, Nanaimo is a stronghold for the NDP, and as much as the Liberals have a strong name candidate, Tony Harris, local businessman who's the son of Tom Harris, the longtime car dealer and cell phone dealer, a well-known retailer of cars and cell phones, of transportation and communication in the hub city. I don't think Tony Harris will enjoy the same reception as his father might have been if his father had run for office at an earlier time. I still think it's the NDP's to lose. Sheila Malcolmson, the local MP, was the strongest candidate they could get, strongest possible candidate they could get. She's decided to throw in the towel from a federal standpoint in order to run provincially. And you'd have to think that if she does win, that maybe she'd end up in cabinet. That's, of course, assuming she wins. But you've got some other candidates. Justin Greenwood is running for the BC Conservatives. That was just announced today. So you've got him on the right who will be taking some votes away from the Liberals, and middle to left, and maybe even a little bit to the right, depending on where you're looking at it. The Greens have Michelle Ney, the daughter of Frank Ney, the longtime mayor of Nanaimo, a late great mayor of Nanaimo, who's last year, if I remember correctly, would have been the centennial of his birth. He was the famous bathtub race mayor who dressed up as a pirate, and he actually spent some time in the BC legislature himself as a social credit member for Nanaimo. But in recent decades, it really has been an NDP stronghold, with Leonard Krogh quitting his job as MLA to run for and win as mayor of Nanaimo. That's what necessitated this by-election for January 30th. John Horgan didn't waste any time calling it at the start of the year. It was one of the first orders in council on January 2nd. There is a lot at stake. I think it might be given a little bit too much play. Of course, if the BC Liberals were to win this, it would bring it to basically a tie in the legislature and force the Speaker to break any tie votes if any tie votes happen, and it would call upon the NDP to have all their members in office at all times. Hope no one catches a cold or catches a flu or misses a ferry. But we're talking about Nanaimo. We're talking about a city where the big issue, I think, will be social spending in the hospital. The Nanaimo Regional General Hospital was for many years a point of contention. A lot of locals said that the BC Liberals didn't fund it well enough because it was an NDP stronghold, and the Liberals didn't think they'd ever win there, so they really didn't pay much attention and write many big checks to do much with that hospital. The management of the hospital actually fell into great decline. And in late 2017, a report by an American consultant who was hired was released, and that basically called it a toxic atmosphere. They polled people that worked in the hospital, people from, all the way from, laundry handlers all the way up to surgeons, nurses in between. And they said there was a bullying and toxic culture. There was a big problem with the introduction of the new digital health system there. And there were people that were working at that hospital who didn't like working there, and there were people that were working at the hospital that didn't like working there so much that they said that they told their relatives that if they ever get ill, seriously ill, don't take them to the hospital to which they work at, but take them to the mainland, take them to a mainland hospital where they could get better service. That's how bad it was. And that was under the BC Liberals, and that report was finally released in fall of 2017, and that necessitated some action by the NDP. So I think that issue is going to weigh heavily, as much as the Liberals are saying, well, the NDP is taking Nanaimo for granted. Well, it isn't really, especially since you've got an NDP government there that's more likely in the weeks to come to make some grand spending announcements. They'll do whatever they can to win this election, write some big checks to make the people in Nanaimo feel a little more welcome than the BC Liberals did when the BC Liberals were in power. It'll be about getting out the vote, and the Liberals are trying to build their own infrastructure there. If you see on social media what the Liberals are doing, they're actually bringing over a lot of party workers from the mainland. They're bringing in Liberal youth workers who go to universities and colleges in the mainland. That just shows that they don't perhaps have the infrastructure that the NDP can draw upon, because being an NDP town with a lot of industry, especially resource industry nearby, you'd have a lot of people from various unions who could take some time off from their work and volunteer, knock on doors and make phone calls. So you never know what can happen in the days and weeks before an election, but I think one thing we've got to watch out for is January 21st, when Darryl Plecas, the Speaker, offers his report on the elements of the BC legislature scandal that do not stray into the criminal forum. He's going to disclose a little bit about why he made the complaint to the RCMP and what some of the spending situations were in the office of the clerk and the office of the sergeant at arms. So January 21st, when that comes out, that could have an impact on Nanaimo, because what Plecas has said to the Legislative Assembly Management Committee meeting in prior meetings was that there were problems in the legislature for management offices for the executives for a long time, going back well before he became Speaker. So that would say that under the BC Liberals, there were problems in the office of the clerk and the office of the Sergeant-at-Arms. It's a place where the Freedom of Information law doesn't have any impact. There's a lot of secrecy there. So what were they spending money on, and what were they doing? Who were they contracting? And did the Liberals know anything about what was going on there? So watch out for January 21st, because the information that flows out of that Legislative Assembly Management Committee meeting could encourage more questions in the Nanaimo by-election for the BC Liberal candidates, as well as give more questions for the NDP candidate to ask. So that may affect things depending on what Daryl Plecas has found. And of course, there were reports earlier this week of a recall campaign that's in the works against Daryl Plecas in Abbotsford South. But I don't know why the Vancouver Sun gave it such big play, especially since the person who's leading this basically has a Facebook page and a Twitter page, and he doesn't actually live in Abbotsford South, so he cannot actually legally lead the recall campaign. And just because someone sets up a Facebook page and says they got 200 to 300 people who are willing to volunteer doesn't mean they really have 200 to 300 people that are willing to volunteer and to actually take time out of their lives and knock on doors and sit at desks at community centers and shopping malls and churches. And the question is there really that much anger in Abbotsford? And do people who are politically inclined have time to be getting involved in these sort of campaigns in a year like we have, where it's 280 plus days until the federal election? The federal parties, especially the Liberals and Conservatives, who include who draw upon support from people in the BC Liberals, is there really the appetite to get involved in this kind of a sideshow campaign when people's energy and people's money will be needed later in this year, especially in summertime when the barbecue circuit happens? So big questions there, especially when there's also a by-election happening in Burnaby South. Kennedy Stewart's old riding, the former mayor of Vancouver, the current mayor of Vancouver is the former MP from Burnaby South, and Jagmeet Singh finally got the date he's been waiting for, the date that people can go to the polls on February 25th and vote for Jagmeet Singh or someone else.
And Bob, perhaps we can talk about that when we come back.
Indeed.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp, MGI and the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected several high-grade gold intersections, including 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. Additional drill targets on the LH property have been identified by a 2018 drone airborne magnetic survey to further evaluate a pyrrhotite-enriched gold-bearing system. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, for several weeks now, I've been getting emails begging me to contribute $2, $3 to the NDP because they wanted to build up their war chest. And one of the reasons was the expected by-election in Burnaby, which will give their leader a chance to actually have a seat in the House of Commons. What are his prospects?
Well, that's a good question. He has, since last summer, been pushing for this, and he finally has it. But at the same time, I think there's some internal dissent that you even have former leader Tom Mulcair saying that, going public and saying that if Jagmeet Singh doesn't win, then he has to resign immediately. And he can't spare a moment if that's the case, because of the time that's needed for a new leader to get in place and campaign for the federal election on October 21st. This could be more difficult than Jagmeet Singh thinks, especially when there are opportunities for him to run in Ontario. And I think that could be a very, very significant problem for him, that he will be seen as this parachute candidate And that's actually the main platform of Karen Wang, the Liberal candidate, a daycare worker who ran for the BC Liberals unsuccessfully in the 2017 election. Well, she's got the Liberal nomination, and she's running against Jagmeet Singh, and that's her main weapon against Singh, is saying, you're just a parachute candidate from Ontario. What do you know about this riding? And if you are elected, you're not going to be able to spend much time in this riding, because you're going to be spending time leading the NDP, a national party. You would have to be a coast to coast to coast leader, instead of someone who can spend the time that's needed to tend to the issues of people in Burnaby. So expect that to be a major part of the debate, and hope for Jagmeet Singh's sake that he's done enough reading in the months while he's waited for Trudeau to call this election, that he understands the history of Burnaby and can answer trivia about Burnaby and know his way around Burnaby, because that could be a big error if he stumbles on the campaign trail in this by-election and says something about Burnaby that is incorrect or wrong, that would give Karen Wang the more ammunition to just point at him and say, send him back to Ontario, vote against him. There is also conservative Jay Shin, he's a lawyer who's running. The Greens are not running. They've decided to extend courtesy to a party leader and not run a candidate. There is another candidate for Maxime Bernier's People's Party of Canada, Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson, the candidate for school board in Burnaby, who raised a lot of controversy because she really is seen as a one issue candidate. So someone who's against the sexual orientation and gender identity program that is in place in school boards across the province. And she's also trying to cater to Chinese donors and Chinese voters. I don't know how far that's going to take her, but I find it interesting that Maxime Bernier's new party is essentially launching with her. She's the first candidate for his new party, and it doesn't seem necessarily as someone who's moderate, definitely not a social conservative. But again, the big issue in Burnaby these days, like the big issue is around Metro Vancouver, is housing and affordability. So expect Jagmeet Singh to try to say he'll do something about that, but he can only do so much about that if he gets elected first as MP, and second if he became Prime Minister in the fall and knocked off Justin Trudeau. I think these things are easier said than done. This will be a very interesting race, because we'll see if Jagmeet Singh can muster enough support from all parts of the party to put him over the finish line, or if there might be people within his own party who are undermining him and hoping he loses so that there can be a leadership contest triggered.
Well, the NDP mayor of Burnaby, Derek Corrigan, was voted out. Is that bad news for Jagmeet?
Don't necessarily think so. I mean, Derek Corrigan was someone who the voters thought lost the plot, basically, that allowed very large real estate interests to build very large towers in Burnaby at the expense of the walk-up apartments, especially on Metrotown. People thought that Derek Corrigan lost touch and wasn't being a traditional NDP leader and spending money on social programs and spending money on housing. So I don't think that'll be a big problem, especially since Derek Corrigan's replacement in Burnaby, Mike Hurley, is seen as someone who is socially liberal himself, and someone who enjoyed support from various unions and enjoyed support from the New Westminster District Labour Council, as well as the firefighters union. So I don't think that we can read too much into Derek Corrigan's loss and apply that to Jagmeet Singh's. I don't think we're seeing Burnaby take a shift to the right. It still is very much an NDP stronghold, even though there have been some pockets of Burnaby that have gone to the right in the past. But the question will be: is Jagmeet Singh the right person to be MP, or is he just an opportunist from Ontario?
Could Tom Mulcair stick his head back up again for the leadership?
Well, that's a good question. And if you look at what could happen if Jagmeet Singh loses and a leadership convention does happen and Tom Mulcair comes back in, there's already a draft Mulcair movement afoot. Don't know how big it is, but it's there. He was seen going into the 2015 election as the favorite. That it could be Prime Minister Tom Mulcair, but one of the typical NDP collapse on the way to election day happened. Mainly because you had Justin Trudeau, who was trading on his youthful energy to go after the younger vote and trading on his name, the Trudeau brand, to try to cater to those older voters who had warm and fuzzies for his father, Pierre Trudeau. At the same time, the opposition to Stephen Harper just mounted during that campaign. Well, here you've got an interesting situation where you've got Andrew Scheer for the Conservatives, you've got Justin Trudeau for the Liberals. Trudeau's been very focused on building his international brand as being this celebrity prime minister who can be a statesman on the world stage, and his main strategy, I think, appears to still be to run against Donald Trump and to be Captain Canada. I think that's what they're trying to bank on, is his celebrity appeal internationally, especially how he measures up against our biggest neighbor. And you have to think that, well, what if Tom Mulcair was to bring in a similar platform as he had in 2015 and show up at the debates and pretend to be the real adult in the room? Because you've got Andrew Scheer, who isn't really stood the test of time as leader of the Conservatives. He's still trying to get out there and get known by people across the country. And then, of course, you'd have Justin Trudeau, who has had a number of mistakes during his first 4-year term, some embarrassing mistakes, and has also been criticized for handling of the economy, handling of the federal books, increasing taxes and increasing the deficit, much bigger than he promised. So could that be a possibility that Tom Mulcair could ride back in and become leader again and find a route to become prime minister this time? There's got to be some in the NDP who are thinking that that's a possibility.
Do you think they're busy polling right now?
Oh, they'd have to be polling. They'd have to be polling, internally, externally. You'd have to think that people who are supporters of others who might want to jump into a leadership race would be doing the same thing. If this was not an election year, then the stakes wouldn't be so high, and perhaps the behind-the-scenes strategizing wouldn't be happening. But they have no time to waste. Literally, if Jagmeet Singh loses on February 25th, they have to begin February 26th. Begin February 26th, planning for their future, because you only have a few months after February 26th until it's the summertime barbecue season, and when the barbecue season happens, you might as well be talking about the election starting. Time travels fast, even though in 6 weeks they say is a political lifetime sometimes, and everything can change. It could be very interesting to see those debates between Jagmeet Singh and Karen Wang and Jay Shin as well from the Conservatives in the by-election in Burnaby South, and see if Karen Wang can really sell that message that why vote for an Ontario invader just because he's the leader of a party.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, the publisher of thebreaker.news. If you have any questions for Bob or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.